Premier League managers no longer have a plan B. They have a plan A and they're going to die trying with plan A regardless of the results. Were Spurs lucky that Manchester City didn't convert all their chances on the day and take all 3 points? Or were Spurs brave in the fact that they stuck to their convictions and were able to score 3 goals away at the Etihad and take a much needed point? Whatever you think, I think we can all agree it was definitely a gutsy performance from Spurs, and I think Ange set the tone with his lineup to begin with. He didn't have too many options because of the injuries, but he did have a couple to choose from, and he went to stick to his principles. Starting off with the fact that Erik wasn't available for this game, therefore he wasn't included. But after Spurs conceded that free kick goal from Aston Villa last week, you could definitely see a situation in which Dyer's much needed height could have come into that defence. But he wanted to stick with the high line, and unfortunately Dyer wasn't available. Therefore, Emerson Royale and Ben Davies were tasked with dealing and marking with Erling Haaland up top, which on paper does look like a bit of a mismatch. But Haaland didn't take his chances on the day, which he did have, and Royal and Davies actually kept him pretty quiet apart from that. You've also got the likes of Basuma, Lo Celso and Kulusevski in midfield. That is a midfield that has never played together for Spurs. Actually really surprising in the fact that they did play with this midfield, because I, for one, thought it might be one where Højbjerg comes into that midfield instead of Kulusevski or Lo Celso. I thought to myself, if I go here, where we have Man City and Spurs' lineup, I think it might have been one where Højbjerg came into that midfield instead of Kulusevski. Højbjerg coming into there, Lo Celso getting moved further on, and then Johnson and Kulusevski the side. And Hill was a surprise starter for me in this game, and I think it was really gutsy by Ange to actually do that because of the fact that Højbjerg would have come in and he would have solidified the midfield a bit more. But now he thought to himself, no, he wants to be in that front foot. And as a result of that, Lo Celso ended up playing the Sarr role in the end, and Kulusevski ended up playing the Maddison role. And it was actually really well done by the three of them, I think, in the fact that Bryan Hill for that first goal did incredibly well. Vicario punched the ball out. Hill turned Foden on the edge of the box, which set off Kulusevski to make that pass to Foden. And I think Jeremy Doku actually did much better because of the fact that I think him against Son on that right on Man City's left, Spurs' right, it was just far too easy for Son to go ahead and get a shot on target, and the fact that Edison probably should have saved it as well. And I do believe that Spurs midfield did struggle a little bit, but when you compare the fact that they're playing against Man City away, I think they actually did really well in the fact that for the first time playing, Basuma, Lo Celso and Kulusevski were able to still, stay in the game and compete with Manchester City as well. I think the fact that Lo Celso playing in that Sarr role and Kulusevski playing in the Maddison role, I think for me, Lo Celso and Kulusevski were really stand-up performance for Spurs. Of course, you can talk about Heung-min Son and the fact that he got the goal. Of course, he did. He even helped Man City out of there and scored the own goal. But I think his work rate off the ball was phenomenal. But for me, Lo Celso and Kulusevski came into this game, and you didn't expect them to have as good a performance as they did. Even though I do think they did struggle against Manchester City, they still did well considering the circumstances and the injuries that Spurs had. I think Lo Celso was able to pick up the ball and was able to spray passes and do very well in doing that. I think the fact that he had he played 40 passes and he completed all of them, 100% pass success rate. Who would if you think about the ball retainers in midfield across world football, you think the likes of maybe Luka Modric, maybe Bernardo Silva in this game. But the fact that Lo Celso was able to have a 100% success rate, even in games when those players, who are well known and renowned for keeping the ball and never losing it, Lo Celso was able to do this against the quality of opposition, against the likes of Rodri, Bernardo Silva, Julian Alvarez, Phil Foden, who came into midfield at times, Akanji, who was inverting into midfield, and the fact that he's able to do that was phenomenal. And then when you think about the fact that Højbjerg came into that midfield in the second half, I think Ange did accept the fact that Spurs weren't playing to their full potential. They should have been able to play the ball a bit more than they were in that first half. But I think a bit of nervousness, maybe lack of chemistry between the different players in the different positions, didn't enable them to do that as well as they would have liked to have done. So Højbjerg coming, I think maybe was Ange accepting the fact that something needs to change, and we maybe need to be, one, a bit more compact in midfield, but two, our forwards aren't doing the job we wanted them to do. And I think Bryan Hill did a fantastic job in that first half. Defensively, he was really working hard for the team. I also think, obviously, like I said, for the first goal, he did amazingly well, spinning Foden on the edge of the box. But against Kyle Walker, he was just a bit redundant. It was a little bit like a school kid coming against a primary school kid coming up against a secondary school kid. It just, it's just a mismatch, and Kyle Walker always had the better of Brian Hill no matter what. Even though Hill does have pace, he does have a bit of trickery, but Kyle Walker is one of the best fullbacks in the world and wasn't able to do much against it. So the fact that Kulusevski did phenomenally in that number 10 position in the Madison role, was then moved out to the right against Gavardio, and then Johnson switched flanks and moved over to the left against Kyle Walker. It actually enabled Spurs to lock down Kyle Walker a little bit, in the fact that because of the fact that Johnson has so much pace, and we saw that in the first half where he was able to get away from Gavardio, who isn't slow, by the way. He was very quick in his own right. But Johnson, over 5 yards, was able to rinse him completely and provide a great chance for Spurs if it wasn't for Ruben Dias getting the block. So Walker had to really keep an eye on Brendan Johnson on that on Spurs' left, Man City's right, and he was able to, he had to keep Kyle Walker there and lock him down, which allowed Kulusevski to go up against Gavardio one-on-one, which we will talk about later on, which allowed him to have some space and time in the box. But it then allowed Lo Celso to move further forward into the number 10 role, and actually what ended up being converting to the goal. But before we get to the goal, I think another crucial point we have to talk about is that despite the fact that Ange made those changes, he brought on Højbjerg in the second half, and he told the team to go out and be more confident on the ball and play your game. It was the fact that Jeremy Doku came off in that second half in the 52nd minute because of the fact he had an injury, which really changed the game. Jack Grealish is a phenomenal player. We all know he is. He's an internationally well-renowned player, but Jeremy Doku does have that little bit of excitement to him. He can go left, he can go right. He really gave Spurs a lot of trouble down their right-hand side. Pedro Porro did a fantastic job in holding him while he was one-on-one with him, but Porro was often given free license on the ball to go and create something in the attack, which meant that sometimes Jeremy Doku was coming against Emerson Royale, and even one occasion he came up against Ben Davies, in which he actually had a cut inside, had the shot, and then hit the crossbar and the post. But when he did come off, it changed the whole complexion completely. Along with Ange bring on Pierre-Emerick Højbjerg, I think that it really, really gave the initiative to Spurs. And Man City did look a little bit lethargic in that second half, and it did think to yourself, there's another goal in this game, at least another one. And if Spurs are now losing 2-1, then you definitely think that they're going to be the ones to get the goal. Because we saw this when Man City played Liverpool last weekend, that the fact that Spurs were, were kind of in that Liverpool mode of they were going for the game, and Man City were kind of passing the ball around the back, trying to keep a hold of the ball, maintain possession and retain and recycle. But Spurs did come at them like Liverpool did last week, and they were able to get that goal. And it all came from the fact that Haaland ended up losing the ball to Ben Davies when he wasn't expecting it from Julian Alvarez, and then Lo Celso picks it up from the edge of the box. And I've removed most of the Man City and Spurs players who weren't involved in this move, but obviously the ball comes into Julian Alvarez here. Here's the ball, and he tried to play the ball into Haaland, but Ben Davies gets there first. Ball ends up at Lo Celso's feet, and I think this is what I mean about, is it brave or is it lucky? I think Spurs made their own luck by the fact that they were brave in this game. I think the fact that they had this many players forward only would have happened under Ange. If you think about last season under Antonio Conte, Christian Stellini, Ryan Mason, would Spurs have had this many players forward on that occasion and were willing to press Man City so high up? I'm not sure. I think they would have sat back and they would have let Man City come onto them, and they would have been a little bit inevitable in the fact that how the game would have gone and predictable. But they didn't let that happen, and they took the game to Man City, because Lo Celso now picks up this ball in space, has a bit of time, and if I can find the arrow, here we go. Kulusevski makes a run on the outside of Gavardio, so therefore Gavardio has to go with him. Kyle Walker is worried about Brendan Johnson's pace, and therefore if Brendan Johnson goes here, Kyle Walker isn't going to engage in the space that he should do alongside Ruben Dias. And then Heung-min Son makes this move. He makes that pass, makes a run out there towards Gavardio, brings out Dias, and obviously there's not that much space, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but Lo Celso was able to bring the ball out with him and shoot into the far corner past Edison. And for me, I think it was what Spurs deserved, because of the fact that at that moment in time they were on the front foot, they were looking for that goal, and Man City had taken the foot off the gas at that moment in time. And then obviously Man City go ahead and get that goal. I think Basuma does overplay that ball in the middle of the park. However, Spurs don't score as many goals if they don't play the way that they play, and I know that Basuma should have maybe not cleared his lines, because I think managers are getting away from that, players are getting away from that, and I think clearing your lines is almost something you do if you're absolutely desperate, if you're having a goal line clearance. I don't think it's something that you often hear it on the sidelines of a Sunday league, or when you hear it sometimes in lower divisions of English football. But to say clear the lines nowadays in the Premier League, I don't think is something that is said or thought about as the first option. Basuma does take a touch too many, and he is crowded out in that midfield. However, if they were to break away from the Man City press, that would create another goal-scoring opportunity for them and another chance. And I think that's what makes this Spurs so endearing to watch, because of the fact they're not willing to just sit back and let the team have possession, and then they're going to pass the ball around them left to right, and create a chance every couple of minutes. They're going to take the game to Man City and say, look, we have a way we're going to play, and we're going to go about doing it no matter what. And I think that's really enjoyable to watch, and I think that offers different matchups, and I think different problems for Man City to try and deal with in a game. I think it means that Man City now then have to think to themselves, okay, teams aren't going to sit back, they're going to come at us. How are we going to cope with that? And more often than not, they will come away with all 3 points, and they won't, on another day, Haaland takes his 2 chances, 3 chances that he should be able to take in the game, and, Man City come away with all 3 points. But if you have a team like Spurs who do have quality in the forward areas, then you do have opportunities where the likes of Kulusevski at the back post can just pop up and head it past Nathan, head to get to the ball first ahead of Nathan Ake and head it past Edison. And I think, on paper, I think Spurs do just about deserve at least a draw. I think if they came out with no points, I think you can go fair enough, on the day they weren't that great. But I do think that individual performances, from like Kulusevski, Lo Celso, Son's work rate, I think the backline did alright, considering the fact that you've got 2 fullbacks essentially playing at centre back, and the fact that they're all below 6 foot, and then you've got the likes of Haaland, Rodri, Akanji, Walker, Gavardio, Diaz in the Man City side. And I'm actually really surprised that Man City didn't try and dominate with their height a bit more than they did. Often you heard Gary Neville on commentary saying, Spurs should be putting that ball into the box a lot sooner. But if you look at the positions that those Spurs wide players were in, you've really got Heung-min Son as a target. Although, despite his diminutive stature, he is exceptional in the air. That I do think that, Akanji, Gavardio, Diaz and Walker will get to the ball first. But I'm surprised that Man City didn't try and capitalise. They did initially, obviously, for the first goal that Spurs scored on the counter-attack. All their players were up against Vicario, trying to make it really difficult for him to come out and punch. But I'm surprised we didn't see a few more of that. And that's what I mean, that teams don't have a plan B anymore. They have plan A, and we're going to make plan A work, and we're going to die trying if it doesn't. And I think Spurs, they've lost the last 3 games, but they come away with a point against Man City, and they've got a really decent record against Man City. I think it's like they've won 5 of the last 8 or something, or drawn the other 3, maybe lost 1 in there. But I think it just goes to show that, managers are going to stick to their principles no matter what, and it makes for more exciting matches. As a neutral, I would rather watch this kind of game than a team come up, go to the Etihad and just sit back and defend. And I think it's really exciting. And I'm even more excited to see what the Spurs side is going to look like once everyone's back and fit. You have the likes of Romero coming back next game. Mickey van der Ven eventually will come back from injury in January. Maddison will come back from injury in January. You've also got the likes of Richarlison, who did come off the bench after his groin injury and surgery, which is actually really surprising. He came back so quickly, but it's a boost. And then when you think about the midfield of Basuma, Sarr, Maddison, then you've also got off the bench Bentancur, Lo Celso. Makes for a really exciting Spurs side, and I think one where they are going to go ahead and play the same way they're going to play, regardless of the team in every game. And sure, they might lose a couple of games, but I think it makes for much more exciting matchups, and I'm all here for it.